Leadership lecture by Pali Tripathi, CEO of Taabi Mobility Limited, RPG group company. And she's going to be talking to us on very exciting topic. In fact, on logistics, maybe some of you are into this field or you're from this stream. This for the first time in the world, there is a great Chinese command, general called Sun Tzu. I'm sure you must have heard, who has written a wonderful book called The Art of War 2,500 years ago. For the first time in the recorded history shows that somebody has used this word logistics, 2,500 years ago. And that's all as far as the history goes, upwards from the Alexander and all that. But I think the most interesting one is that, since the time the wheel is born, the logistics is also born, right? I think that's what, if you look at the history part of it. But I think we've also seen during pandemic how important this has become, right? When the entire life has come to standstill, the only people who could make our lives, get going is the people from logistics and supply chain management. And of course, some of these challenges are even today persisting. But nevertheless, what we also got to see in India is the rise of startups, incubation, and the way they have been scaling up, especially to do with the last mile delivery also. And to do all that, we have Pali Tripathi, who comes with a very illustrious experience. And before I hand over the platform to her, let me have the pleasure of introducing her formally to all of you. And she's an MBA graduate from the illustrious business school, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And she's also done a wonderful program in global leadership development program from Indian School of Business. Immediately after her MBA from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, she started work with Unilever as business partner for 2 years. And as I read out, as you can imagine, right, it's all marquee companies. After Unilever, she worked with Ernst & Young for 4 years. Firstly as manager business advisory services, and later as a senior consultant, right? And that's, like I said, is for 4 years. After that, she was with another market consulting company called Booz & Company as a senior associate strategy, where she worked for 3 years and 6 months. And after Booz & Company's stint, she worked with the PwC Strategy India Private Limited, director strategy and at PwC. Right, for about 10 months. And currently, she's also serving on 2 very important boards, right? One is tiresandmore.com, and the second one is there's the CET, and where she worked in CET, for 5 years, and last stint that she had was with as Vice President Sales and the Fleet Solutions. And like I said, the other board that she's serving on is Hupper Foods, where she's working as a member board of directors from April 2021 onwards. And she's also, like I said, on the board of eFleet Systems Private Limited. And since September 2022, she's been working as the Chief Executive Officer of Taabi Mobility Limited, which I said is a group company, one of the group companies of RPG Limited. And like I said, she's going to be talking to us on logistics industry and the incubation and scaling up. Over to you, Pali.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Chaudhary. I hope I'm audible, visible. I think these are the most often repeated words on planet. So before I start, I think somebody had raised their hand. Was there any issue in terms of listening or anything else? Okay, I'm assuming not. Okay. So let me start with one of my favorite quotes. If you can go to the next slide. Nandita, is a slide? Yeah. Okay. So I'm not a great fan of Mike Tyson for a lot of things, though he did have quite an illustrious career. But I think in the world of startups, this is a saying that really hits the mark, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And usually, the entity that does the punching in the startup space is the customer. Right. So that's something that's extremely important to remember as we go ahead and talk about lot of the things that Dr. Chaudhary said. What I would like to be able to do today, if the format allows, is make it interactive. Just go back, Nandita. Let me just finish, please. So what I would like in terms of rules of engagement, I would love for you to ask questions. And Nandita, if you can just keep an eye on the chat box, and at an appropriate time, just take a pause and raise questions. I'd be more than happy to answer. Second, if I'm asking questions, I'm absolutely okay to hear you, answer, to put your comments on chat, and share anecdotal experience, right? Because you guys are not first year MBA students who've never worked before, right? So you guys have experience, is what I understand. You know quite a few industries. And I think this will make the whole session more enriching if all of us are able to kind of bring that combined experience to the session. So on some of that note, let me get started. A lot of what I'd be sharing today would be based on, one, my experience with startups, either as a board member or as a chief strategy officer, or as a consultant, or now where I am leading a startup, right? And before this, I scaled a business within the group to about 400 to 500 crores or so. So a lot of the experiences are going to be about what I have done myself in the logistics space, but I would also be talking about some of the marquee examples, for example, Delivery, Rivigo, etc. Companies that I have seen up close and personal, and I would love to share things that I believe are insightful. However, as I said before, if you have your own experiences around these, I would love to hear. Go ahead to the next one. Let's start with a quiz. So, what do you think is the most important factor in the success of a startup? So, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm just opening the chat to see your answers. I would love to know, what do you think is the most important factor? Let's start looking at some answers. 4, business model. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Samin. Yeah. I think we have not enabled people to talk, I'm assuming. That's why they're not able to share.
So, right, I think I would request all of you to please put in the chat box or Q&A box, either way. Be okay. If all of you can please.
Okay, there are people raising hands, so I think.
Shivaram Krishna and Vishwanath, if you can kindly put your response in the chat box, right, just to make sure that we have a seamless, flow.
Okay, 4, 4, 1, 4, 4, 1, 1, 4, 4. So I think the problem statement and the business model seem to be the most popular answer. Okay. All right. So let me tell you what the research says. The research says that the most important thing for the success of a startup is timing, right? Which is almost in 42% of the cases where the study was done over a period of time, was a global study, had Harvard Business School leading it. What they found was in 42% of the cases where the startups were successful. And when I say the meaning of successful, the usual works apply. They went to an IPO, they still exist after 10 years. There's a brand awareness that exists, etc. Right? So the usual works that typically you and I would kind of use to define a startup. So timing was 42%. The second one, very interestingly, was team, which is about 32%. And business model was the fourth, actually. Before that, it was idea, which a lot of you picked up, or the problem statement, which is 28%. The last one was funding, and I'm so impressed that most of you did not pick that up. I thought a lot of you would talk about funding, because one assumes that VC मिल गया, there is a strategic partner, there's an investor, I have been valued at some atrocious multiple, and now I'm successful, right? Typically. But that's not the case as all. Funding is in fact one of the least important indicators of whether a startup is successful or is going to be successful or not. What I'll do today is touch upon two or three of these given the paucity of time, right? I'll not be able to get into all of them, but some of them I want to get into. One is the timing, right? So when I talk about the logistics industry, why I believe that right now is the right time for a lot of investors to get into it, for a lot of startups to get into it, for a lot of professionals to get into it. The second thing that I would want to talk about is this whole problem statement, right? The idea, which a lot of you picked up, that it does make sense intuitively to think that, unless your problem statement is defined well, that you're solving for something that is legitimately something that faces a problem, and faces a problem in terms of a critical mass of people, right? So the word that typically gets used for that is TAM, which is the total addressable market, right? So there needs to be a total addressable market where there's a significant chunk of it that is facing this problem. So that's the second thing that I want to touch upon. I will briefly talk about aspects related to team and execution, but to the extent of what do you do, right? So what are some of the things that happens at the incubation stage, and what are some of the things that happen at the scale up stage that are about execution, and as a result lead to the success. So this is a sum and substance of my presentation. Let's get started. Let's go to the next one. So the way the presentation is divided, the first one is about the timing that I talked about, right? So what is it that today is happening in the Indian logistics industry? And of course, we can talk about global also, but let's assume that, hey, we are sitting here and if there is a critical mass and there's a critical problem to be solved here, then I think the opportunity becomes more interesting as opposed to I solving for, let's say, in Americas or in Europe, right? So we'll talk about some of the factors and some of the very interesting things that are happening in the logistics industry right now, and as a result, why it seems like something that would make it worth solving. The second is what are the key challenges and the problems that are worth solving. There are some players that are solving it. There are some white spaces. So if you have some startup ideas and you end up starting it, please do get in touch and let me know if something emerges out of this discussion. And the last one before we get into the Q&A is what is really the concept of incubation and what is the concept of scale, right? So what is it that you do differently when you're incubating, and what is it that you do differently when you're scaling is extremely important to understand, because a lot of players mix up the two things, right? They try solving for scale problems when they are at incubation, and they try solving for incubation problems when they are at scale. And I'll give you some examples when we talk about it. So moving on to the first one, in terms of what makes the Indian logistics industry very attractive right now for any player, whether it's an investor or some of you who could be budding entrepreneurs or even professionals who want to join some of these companies that are in that startup space. The first very important thing is the India story, right? So if you guys are investors in mutual funds or SIPs and you have an investment advisor, I'm sure this is what you'll be hearing from them again and again, right? That no, you should invest blindly. Let's invest in equity, or don't invest in debt. India's story is amazing. There are these American HNIs that are investing in India because this is the only country that sees stability in terms of growth, etc., and is quite protected from some of the global mishaps that are likely to happen in the future, very similar to recession, etc. It is protected to a great extent because of the way it is built. So if you look at India, it's been consistently high growth rate country, and it has a vast logistics market because of how wide this country is, also how different the problem statements are given the diversity of the country, and also because of the number of consumers that it has. So with the kind of GDP growth rate of about 7% or so, and it remaining something near about it, it becomes it tick marks all the boxes as far as macroeconomic factors are concerned about logistics. And keep remembering timing is important. So this is something that adds to the timing. Go to the next one. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. The second one is the government initiatives and reforms that are happening. Now, a lot of you would have heard about the national logistics policy, and that's something that I want to take a minute to explain to you, right? So, a lot of people say, "Kuch to aaya hai," like there is this national logistics policy that has come and it's supposed to do wonders. A lot of people don't understand how does it envisage to do these wonders, and what does it mean for investors and entrepreneurs who want to come into this, right? I'll come back to it. There are other reforms like GST that have been kicked off for a long time, your dedicated freight corridors, the Bharatmala project, which is about, key road interconnections across the country that ensure that you're able to move seamlessly across the quadrangle using the needed infrastructure, right? So there's lots that is happening in terms of the thrust by the government. If you hear any of the last 3 to 4 years of budget proposals by the government, by the finance minister, you will see that huge airtime gets devoted to infrastructure, to logistics, to country building, right? There are these projects around roads, railways, which require significant funds that the government keeps talking about. Now, coming to the national logistics policy, what is it and what is it trying to do? By the way, one of the examples that I forgot before, and it just clicked me that I should have shared it with you before, on the importance of timing, was a lot of you would know the delivery story, right? So it was started by these two gentlemen called Sahil and Suraj, right? So this is I think back in 2011, if I've got the timing right. So what happened was these guys are hanging out, Sahil and Suraj, at the house, and they ordered a restaurant for some. So they called a restaurant for some food, right? So it was in the peak of Zomato and Swiggy. It was still when let's say Amazon was starting up, Flipkart was at a very nascent state, somewhere around ideation, etc. That's when this story happened. So now these two gentlemen, they call their favorite restaurant and they tell the restaurant ki khana bhejo, right? Like as usual. They get their order late by about 2 hours. Now the delivery man is all harassed and is kind of sorry for it. They are regular customers, and that's when these guys ask, he why is it late, but right? And this guy says that the restaurant is going to shut down and all of us are going to lose the job. And so Sahil asked that, why is it going to shut down? They said that a lot of our business is through orders, and we are not really able to provide the kind of fulfillment that the customers are looking at. And we're seeing a lot of regular customers not really, turning up again. So there are no repeat customers. And because a big chunk of the business is basis order delivery, if that's something that goes for a toss, then all of us lose our jobs. So Sahil and Suraj went and met the restaurant owner to understand what was the story, and he corroborated that yes, this was the case. That's when the idea stuck that if hey, there are these set of people, it was a biggish restaurant with about 15 to 20 delivery boys. They said, hey, there is this set of 15 to 20 people. What can we do with them, right? So their expertise is delivery. What should we be really doing? And one of the things that came to their mind is uh, e-commerce was buzzing at that point of time. So I think around that time it was about 150 billion or so. In, the value of the Indian e-commerce industry. And they knew from all reports and everything else that was coming up that this is something that was growing to go. And everybody was finding that as a challenge, right? That, for example, a lot of these empty orders that came, right? So you and I, if you remember those early days when you started ordering, you would get everything, your delivery wala would be standing at the door and you would be trying things for about an hour, and then it would go back, and you may not even end up even doing the purchase, right? So there's a lot of these empty orders happening. COD was something that was really, really big, and all these problems were what, let's say, an Amazon, and later on some of the players that came up, whether it is Flipkart, Rabong, Myntra, all of them were facing. And that's when these guys decided that this is because e-commerce industry is buzzing, we need to kind of look at what could happen in this industry. Maybe this is a problem worth solving for. And we'll come back to the story later, but just on timing, I think this is why it's extremely important that if they had done this before the time of the e-commerce industry, it would not have been relevant. And if they had done it now, there would already be too many players who would be in the mix. Right. So timing is something that is extremely important when you're looking at the problem statement. And timing has many connotations also in terms of, whether the customer. So there's one thumb rule for knowing whether the timing is right. It is whether there's a large number of customers, a large a portion of the market that is willing to consume the service, and so essentially bugged with that problem and hence willing to consume that service. Anyway, so more on that later. We'll continue the delivery story now. Coming back to the national logistics policy. National logistics policy is this huge mammoth document, and I took some notes from it just to share with you so that you understand it a little bit better. So for anybody who's talking about the logistics industry or wants to do anything with it, this is an extremely important document. I strongly suggest you go and read most of it. If not, there are a lot of excerpts that are available around it on the internet. Do read about it. But some of the key tenets of this is what I want to share. So why was this document drafted? This document was drafted because cost of transporting 1 metric ton of goods today, if you look at it by air, it is about rupees 18. If you look at it by road, it is about 3.5 rupees per kilometer per metric ton. And it is about 1.6 rupees if we look at it by railway. Now, intuitively, you would think because railways are extremely cheap, the bulk of our transportation would be happening by railways, right? But that's not true, and most of you would know that is not true. So if you look at the actual numbers today, by road, 75% of our transportation happens by road. Only 17.5% of our transportation happens by railway. Right. And the reason why railways are not used is because we don't have enough rails, we don't have enough tracks. And also it is very cumbersome to do this by railways. So for example, your last mile and first mile is absolutely not connected, right? So from the truck to the railway, and then later on, once it reaches the final destination, from there to the last mile, there is absolutely no productivity, no connectivity. So that becomes a huge challenge. The second issue with railways is your on-time arrival, right? So you never know ki ek baar maal lad gaya aapka railway mein, is it something that is actually going to reach first? And the second question is that if it reaches, will it reach on time? And third is, if it reaches on time, then will it reach in OTIF, right? Whether on time and full becomes a big issue with railways for supply chain professionals out there. Right. So the other issue is your so this is one problem that your national logistics policy is trying to solve for. That how do you make these interconnections between multimodal transport systems that would bring down the cost of transporting goods per metric ton per kilometer, right? So that's one of the key challenges, and the challenges are like I just now told you. The second thing is, if you look at it, the whole system is very bureaucratic. So I think there are some 2,000 approximately checkpoints that are needed if you're using railways before that, after that, etc., and certifications that are required if you want any work done through railways as a means of transport, right? Now let's come to trucks, right? So let's say, ठीक है, अभी railway नहीं हुआ, let's look at trucks, right? Trucks we must be super efficient. However, the story of life in trucks is that only 40% of our trucks run 60% of our trucks run full load. So 40% of the trucks actually run empty, right? So essentially, let's say if there is a Mumbai to Chennai, a truck goes to Mumbai to Chennai, it may take anywhere between 1 to 3 days for it to find a truck full load for it to come back and for it to make sense. So if a truck is running for only 15 days a month, you can imagine what is a kind of margin that is flowing between different entities in this ecosystem. The second thing is, if you're to just look at the global benchmarks, and this is something that Prime Minister Modi talked about when he spoke, during the launch of the policy, is that an Indian truck on an average runs about 300 kilometers per day, whereas globally, the average, okay, I'm not talking about best in class, average is anywhere between 500 to 800 kilometers, the average. And that number goes to record highs when you look at some of the developed countries in the world. The other issue with this whole thing, so that's the second problem statement that the national logistics policy is trying to solve for. And the reason I'm talking to you about it is to seed ideas in your head about that thing that a lot of you, talked about, the idea, right? The problem statement. What is the problem statement that the government is trying to solve? And as a result, provides an opportunity for a lot of players to come in. The other issue is in terms of the seamlessness of the process, right? So between a trucker and a shipper, there's almost 2.5 to 3 intermediaries that are involved. So the moment an intermediary comes in, it essentially means that you're losing margins, right? So with each intermediary, you're losing at least 5%. So that makes it at least about 15 to 17% of margin loss that a trucker who is anyways running on wafer thin margins, anyways running his truck just 15 days a week, 15 days a month is facing, right? So that's again a problem that this policy is trying to solve for. The other thing that it is trying to do, and that's where some of these things about dedicated freight corridors and Bharatmala project comes in, that if you see the whole trucking system in India is very point to point, right? So if you look at, let's say, any 5 cities in the country, let's say Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, Hyderabad, you will typically have a truck that goes from Mumbai to Hyderabad, comes back to Mumbai, goes to Bangalore, or goes from Bangalore to Chennai, etc. And you have, let's say, between 5 cities, you would have, let's say, 10 trucks that are applying to address the need. Now, one of the things that this document, this policy over the next 10 years is trying to do is, how do we make it a hub and spoke model, right? Because and hub and spoke is something that is so common and so heard of in a lot of companies that we work for. So all of you who are in the manufacturing industries, you would think this is such a passe, right? That to have it, it's such a common sense to have a hub and spoke model to bring about efficiencies of scale. So a hub and spoke model is nothing but that, let's say, these 5 cities that we're talking about, we make, let's say, Bangalore a hub. And then the trucks that are plying would be divided between these hub and spokes, right? So there is something that is coming to Bangalore and coming back from Bangalore and is assured of a load back because of this hub and spoke model. So what the government is trying to do is solve for a lot of these issues. However, there are a lot of problems, right? It sounds very simple when we say this, but just this fact itself presents a plethora of opportunities for us to solve. And so the timing is right, because, hey, the government is talking about doing this. They have proclaimed it. It's almost burning the bridge kind of a statement, right? So burning the bridge in the strategic terminology, if you read these books by famous strategists, burning the bridge essentially says that I proclaim it to the world that I'm going to do it, right? So Modi's proclaimed it to the world that this is what I'm going to do. Of course, he's a politician as well, and he may have proclaimed a lot of things, but what he has proclaimed is that we will be on par with best in the world as far as cost of transportation per metric ton per kilometer is concerned, right? So that presents a huge opportunity, that presents a plethora of problems that allow for us to get into and solve for. I'll take a quick pause before I get into some of the other slides. Any questions?
There are
Yes.
three questions, Pali, but I
Yeah.
think it might be a good idea to take all of them at once towards the end of it. Is that okay?
Yeah, so combination of transportation methodologies, I'll come to it, right? So, hub model, what is hub and spoke model is, if that's the question, hub and spoke model is like a network, right? So there is something at the center, and then you have different points that are attached to the hub. So as opposed to everything connecting to each other, everything connects to the hub. So do read up about it because there's a lot of information that is available around it. Hub and spoke models typically lead to huge efficiencies in any supply chain. Yes, absolutely. The Mumbai Dabbawala does use a lot of what I'm talking about, and hence it's a case study, right? Even talked about at Harvard. Um, so let's come back to why not use a combination of transportation methodologies. I'll continue the reference to the logistics document as well as to delivery and some of my own experience in building what I'm building, and I'll talk to you about it when I come back to the answers. So the second thing, which makes it, sorry. So just go back. Just go back. So no, the previous slide, please. Yeah, so we talked about economic growth, we talked about government initiatives and reforms, and the third one, which is what I have been talking to you about, is a huge e-commerce industry, right? The slide has not changed, Nandita. Yeah. So if you look at the market size, it's huge, right? I mean, it's it doesn't even require comparison with any other country. Like we don't even need to look outside India to think of a market, right? The market is so huge, and some of the numbers are written there. So you have the logistics market that is huge, and you have an e-commerce industry that is growing exponentially, and yet not really touching most of tier C, tier D villages, etc. Right. So pop strata, the population strata of, let's say, less than 10,000, which is a substantial portion of the country, is not even catered to completely by most of these. And that's where, let's say, some of the players like Misho, Udan, etc., are trying to make a difference, right? Now, all of these e-commerce companies, they heavily rely on efficient logistics networks. I already told you what the problem statements are. And some companies like delivery are trying to solve for it, but they're not really solving for it completely. The problems are still open. That brings in a huge opportunity. And the other bit is this whole internet penetration, right? It is something that is completely changing the consumer behavior. So you have customers who want all these goods and services. They're aware of these goods and services, but there are very few opportunities for them to really get it, right? So as an urban citizen, it may seem like we've come a long way, but all it takes is for you to spend, let's say, a week in a village, let's say in a UP or far south, and you will understand how disconnected are we in a lot of ways, though we are connected, right? So you would have, for example, Geo coming in and all the entertainment coming in on mobile apps there, but they may still not have access to basic food, medicine, and even lifestyle products that are aspirational for this set of the population. So this, as a result, becomes a huge opportunity for anybody who wants to get into it. Let's move ahead. Now, what does it mean in terms of problems? I will talk about a few, but I would love to also hear from you what you think are the additional problems. So you've heard about the national logistics policy, you've heard about some of the problems that the startups are trying to solve for. I would love to hear from you. In addition to what I'm just going to talk about, what do you think could be the additional problems that we could solve for? The first one is the last mile delivery efficiency. Now, in some ways, you have everybody trying to solve for it, but the pie is so big that it requires multiple players from multiple angles to come into it, right? It's a final leg of the delivery, so which helps you reach the consumer doorstep. So solving for it is still a huge opportunity. It's still open. Still, there are a lot of white spaces there. So, for example, to tell you, most of the biggest names in the industry, let's say Hindustan Unilever, Procter and Gamble, Asian Paint, CF for that matter, Nestle, a lot of these consumer durable ones. If you look at Samsung, etc. If you asked a distributor, right, the secondary distributor, do you know when the goods are going to come to you? The distributor will say no, right? So you would think that this is a problem that's solved for कि एक हिंदुस्तान यूनिलीवर के डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर को पता होगा कि मेरा माल मेरे पास कब आएगा. So he will know basis experience, he will know basis this is what generally happens, but he would not have a simple trace and track understanding of where are the goods as of now, and at what time will they hit me. And then you take it further, right? When this distributor has to then cater to, let's say, the kirana stores don't know when are the goods going to be delivered to me. So there are a lot of POCs, proof of concepts, that are being done, but nobody has solved for this at scale. So the kirana stores really don't know when is this good going to come to me. They also don't know, for example, what is it that is going to come to me. Forget about whatever, right? So the previous day there is somebody who would have taken the order, but then something would have happened in the supply chain जहाँ पे rain का supply कम हो गया होगा, right? So it's in short quantity. Now the kirana store thinks that he's going to get this order full, but he may not get rain at all that day, or may not get the variant that he needs, but he doesn't know it, right? He's still waiting, assuming that if there is somebody who's taken the order, then it's going to come. Now, these are efficiencies that, let's say, these FMCG companies are working on, but they're not very tech-led. They're still very, very process-led, right? And there are other problem statements that come in as a part of this. So let's say in Hindustan Unilever will tell this Kirana store that you have to keep all variants of of the shampoo, right? So let's say a clinic, right? So clinic ka sara variant from sachet to your family pack you must keep, because we believe that the more variants that are available with you, more likelihood of whoever is coming, you being able to convert. Right now, the problem statement that is related to logistics in this space is how do you, getting other players in it. So, for example, people who can provide credit basis this kirana store's behavior, right? This is an unorganized part of the country. They don't have credit history. Nobody wants to give them a loan. They typically take loans from the distributor or from private players at huge cost. But again, there are even now, there would just be a few startups who are trying to solve this problem basis this behavior. Now, this behavior where you have a large part of the unorganized trade that doesn't have access to finance, still needs to cater to the consumer, doesn't know what my consumer will get or where my goods are, is replicated multifold in any part of the supply chain that I'm talking about. The same problem statement, for example, a fleet owner will have, who's supposed to deliver these goods, right? A fleet owner, let's say, who will have 8 trucks or 10 trucks, who wants to grow and wants to buy more trucks to be able to cater to more number of requirements that these companies face. But again, there would be hardly any people who would be giving them credit, who would be giving them visibility, etc. So this is just tip of the iceberg, right? I can go on and on about just the problem statements that exist related to last mile delivery efficiency. So there is a need for innovative solutions around route planning, implementing tracking technologies, and also a lot of these emerging technologies, like, for example, blockchain, drones, etc. That would make it pertinent. So just to give you an example, the company that I lead, Taabi Mobility Limited, the problem statement that we are trying to solve for is how do I improve a fleet operator's fuel efficiency, and how do I improve this fleet operator's uptime. The reason I'm doing this is because there are so many inefficiencies, right, that it presents for a huge market. This guy is running with wafer thin margins, right? Like I said, there are so many intermediaries. He's getting squeezed. He's not running his truck 25 days or 26 days. He's not running it 500 kilometers, 800 kilometers. As a result, all that he gets is the 5 to 6%. So until you reduces cost or increases revenue, this critical part of the logistics industry is not going to thrive. So the problem statement we've taken ourselves is how do we do this? How do we, for example, predict a vehicle breakdown so that this customer doesn't send a truck on a critical route for a critical customer when he knows कि ये गाड़ी मेरा 10 घंटे चलेगा, इसका gear खराब होने वाला है, right? So you get into technology there to be able to predict that. You get into uptime related solutions through control tower, which again we are, for example, launching, where we say that you don't please bother about making your truck running efficient, right? That's not your core expertise. Your expertise is getting freight. Your expertise, your focus needs to be about getting that customer. Let us ensure that your per mile efficiencies are better. And we do it better. Why? Because we have technology. We have resources that can be shared over aggregated set of truck owners or fleet owners who can manage these trucks online and be able to tell me, let's say, when is the driver idling, when is goods going to be late, when is the likelihood of an accident, what data needs to be given to the insurance, right? So there's no end to that application. So these kind of solutions, you need more and more and more. So when you think of logistics, typically you think delivery, you think these, Swiggies, etc. of the world. You think of Amazon. You also think of, huge ships and cargoes and airlines. But what you don't think is that the application is across functions. So the problem is a supply chain problem. The problem is a finance problem. It's a tech problem. And it's also to a large extent an empathy problem. A lot of us don't really know where the application is. Like I said, a huge opportunity for a lot of us to get into. Let's go ahead. Any questions? Sorry, if there are any new questions, I can take them up. Did we see Roro services, truck on train kind of transportation? Okay, so let me come back to the end because some of these questions are not very clear when I read it to them. So I'll come at the end and I would like you to explain them to me and then I can answer. Let's go ahead. I'm also cognizant of time. So yeah, yeah. Can we go to the next slide? I spoke about a lot of these. I referred to blockchain. I talked about real-time visibility, etc. Right. The last bit is your warehousing and inventory management. So a lot of what delivery is known for, so if you see when they started at the incubation stage, the problem they were trying to solve for is let me get a set of aggregated trucks and ensure that Amazon's goods are being delivered to that last point, right? They didn't own a lot of that infrastructure. There, the problem statement was let me make it process oriented, let me make it tech oriented, let me solve for visibility. Now, at the scale up stage, where they've come up is that if for me to get efficiencies on scale, I need my own warehouses, I need my own fleet. So, example, they have about close to 2,000, last mile vehicles that they run themselves, and they run experiments on those vehicles, and then they kind of get it to scaled up areas. They've also now moved away from e-commerce into more business segments, which are scale level problems. So if you see delivery, what they started with as a root cause of the problem was visibility, transparency. What they're solving for right now is inefficient warehousing and inventory management practices, which is absolutely tech led. And if you see just the way our country is led, it's even if there are warehouses, there's no process or system around it, right? So let's say you have an operator that just puts up these warehouses on a portal and tells you that these are available to you to warehouse before you move to the next part of your transportation. You don't really know what is happening with your goods, right? There's no trace and track available. There are no cameras that are telling you and have an eye on your goods that this is the status of your goods and this is the likelihood when you're going to get. And as a result, you'll be able to control your customer expectation, your cost mechanisms, etc. around it. So a lot of opportunity here to have solutions around warehouse operations, inventory tracking, and also technologies like IoT and RFID. So, for example, Taabi uses a lot of IoT. So, when we define ourselves in terms of identity, we say Taabi is an IoT-enabled SaaS company for logistics, right? So that's our definition. And the reason why we say IoT enabled is that we need a lot of data around these vehicles that are moving everywhere. So data around, let's say, if there is a fuel theft happening, so there are fuel sensors that are installed in these trucks. Fuel is 60% of the cost of an operator. So if you're able to solve for even 10% of that problem, that's huge savings for a fleet operator. So these IoT devices give you that kind of a thing, or these trucks that have to be temperature controlled. Typically, a driver will shut the AC off so that the mileage is better and he can save on fuel, which goes in his pocket. But what happens is that if I'm saying AC as in the coolant, right? Whatever is cooling the cargo, he switches it off. So now what happens the moment he does that is that leads to damage of the goods, that leads to a lot of rejections, etc. There are IoT devices like video telematics, etc. Cameras, intelligent cameras that are able to tell you, and also temperature sensors that are able to tell you that this has happened, and a trigger immediately goes to the driver that this is something that is not acceptable. So these kind of problems are a plenty and are worth solving across the country. The interesting thing is that if you solve for India, it's really a cakewalk to solve for a lot of other countries outside the world, because they are so much more organized than India, right? So in logistics, that's what they say, that if you can solve it for India, the rest of it, you just on for the same solution, much better ASPs, which is average selling price compared to India, 4x or 5x. And your costs don't increase that much. Your costs would, let's say, go from 1x to 2x. And if you're a tech-enabled startup, then you're able to cater pretty much with the same set of solutions outside India also to much richer nations, right? So it becomes made in India for India, and it also becomes made in India for the world, which is again a great story also for us. Go ahead. Now, getting to just switching gears, right? So I talked about a lot of these, that there's an opportunity, the timing is right, and I referred to some of the problem statements. I did ask you for your ideas around it, and maybe let's come back, and Dr. Chaudhary, you can guide me how tight we are on the timeline. But I would love to hear more from you in terms of what are the ideas that we could work on, or you think we could additionally work on, right? To just complete that statement that I made before, and also to get back to the questions you've answered. So a lot of these problem statements, not only for logistics, but for any kind of a startup, you use these two concepts as a startup, right? So you may use it formally. So incubation, you can use formally by being part of an incubator. Incubator is nothing but something that allows for you to develop your initial proof of concept, right? So this is where you are still trying to understand what is my business model, what is my customer problem, what is the tech stack or the solution stack that I will build to be able to do it. But you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, right? So you don't want to spend on office, you don't want to spend on let's say connections. You need initial funding, seed stage money, and you don't want to break the bank for it. So that's where you get into that incubation. Now there's a formal term called incubation, which refers to incubators that are incubating. These incubators in India exist in, there are a lot of government incubators. For example, there is an Atal Bihari Yojana where you have innovation center where they do a lot of incubation. Most of IITs have incubation cells where you can go and get yourself incubated if it's a tech solution. And yes, they also accept ideas from outside. Most of the MBA colleges, the top-notch ones, so whether it is the IIMs or the ISBs, they have these incubators. And now a lot of companies, right, they also run incubation. So for example, I led this incubation for RPG in my role as chief of strategy, where we would run marathons in terms of inviting ideas. And once the idea came came in, we provided office space, we provided mentorship, and we also provided initial seed money to be able to help the startup start, right? So this stage is all about validating whether idea mein dum hai, right? So whether there is at least one single customer problem that you're able to solve for basis whatever it is that you have thought about, right? So often one of the mistakes that startups do is they get very happy with the idea. So they believe that up to matlab, I've got this god level idea, and now it's just matter of time before $1 billion valuation. But I think that next step about applying that idea to actually solve for a real business challenge, a real consumer challenge, is something that really makes or breaks that journey from incubation to scale up, right? So incubation is all about testing. So the process is all about testing. And like I said, there are a lot of these formal setups that exist to help you test these ideas. You could do an incubator on your own. You could get together with a set of people and do this whole thing that I talked about, right? With shared resources, shared ideas, shared testing, etc. Let's go ahead. Nandita, can you change the slide? Yeah. So now the scale up stage. Now, scale up stage, unlike the incubation stage, is kind of made of 3 steps, right? The first step is just designing it, right? So you have to be thoughtful about it. That okay, I have done it. So let's say in my case, right? So we are just out of that incubation bit, right? So for example, we are on about 1,000 trucks with the solution that we've created, and we've been able to show fuel savings of about 10% and uptime improvement of about 10 to 15% for these fleet operators. Now, the question in front of me now is, now how do I take it from these 800 to 1,000 trucks to, let's say, 50,000 trucks to a lakh trucks? And how do I then also get enterprises involved? Right? So, for example, supply chain managers, your warehouse managers, transport managers, etc., involved as a part of this. How do I get OEMs involved, the people who sell trucks to me or to my fleet operator, the insurance people who sell insurance to the truck operators? How do I get all of them together, right? So that design is something that's extremely important, where you go back to the drawing board and define what do you want to achieve, right? So for example, for me, the problem statement is, how do I go to a lakh assets, right, or lakh devices from where I am, and then looking at what is needed to be able to do that. What does it mean in terms of my technology stack? So let's say today I'm operating with, I mean, something very, very simple. If you guys are from tech, you will understand that there is a certain server cost, right, that comes, let's say it is $1 per asset. How do I get this dollar per asset to, let's say, 30 cents per asset? Because $1 per asset, if I were to bring it to a lakh assets, it'll be something that will be detrimental to the business case that I'm making, right? So how do you essentially take those calls? That's something that becomes a question, right? The second is, how do I know uh, that these are the factors that will make or break my scale up? It's very important to articulate that. So whether it is understanding, so for example, in my case, what is important is adoption by these fleet operators, right? That they need to adopt this technology, this digitization, to be able to do it. And let's say the driver is an extremely important agent in this whole thing. So how do I do that? How do I make a formal change management program around it? How do I get resources around it? And then the last bit is around just managing the scale, which is, as a result of wanting to do this, what kind of org structure I will need, what kind of solution stack I will need, how will I get ecosystem partners in, how will I maintain quality, etc., etc., right? So this is what scale is about. Scale is about, once you've proved something for a minimal number of customers where you've been able to solve a problem, how do you make that leap of action and leap of organization to be able to cater to a much, much larger mass of customers? This is where most startups, as you would know, fail, right? Because they take the focus away from that problem statement. So like I spoke about before, that you believe you're trying to, so let's say in my case, if let's say I'm trying to solve for fuel and uptime, In the scale up stage, if I end up solving for something else, then the whole business case goes for a toss, right? And that's where a lot of players, if you look at examples, they would have failed. One of the things, criticisms about delivery, for example, not being profitable, is that they are not focused. Right, so they started with a problem statement, but now if you see, they have huge amount of assets that have become actual liabilities because of the spends that they have done. Now, of course, their logic is that to scale, this is what I need. But at the end of the day, the question remains that are you really solving that original problem, or adding to the solution set, solving the same set of problems, right? So the focus that is required to be able to do that, and the scalability factors that come in. Go ahead. So some of these examples that I've been talking about before, and we talked about opportunities, if I were to apply the concepts of incubation and scale, let's say to a last mile delivery opportunity, right? So in this case, incubation could be, let's say we are focusing on the technology, right? So what is the tech stack that will solve for it? So in my case, for Taabi, for example, it is what is that solution that will end up reducing the cost of the fuel, right? So that's the incubation. And here I have collaborated with a lot of industry experts. So, for example, I've gone and spoken to an Ashok Leland, a Tata Motors, an HPCL, vehicle dynamic experts. I've tied up with universities to understand how is it that I can make a difference in the space. And then there is that whole real-time tracking and ensuring that I am able to really prove that I have been able to solve for this problem. So in this case, if you see the last mile delivery thing, it's pretty much, the same set of things that I talked about. Go ahead. Then in the scale up stage for a last mile delivery, this is about a wider network. For example, a delivery, right? That let's say they were running it for X number of network points. Now they have to run it for lakhs of network points. So how do they do that? Then again, it is about more partnerships. So it is about manufacturers, it is about retailers, it is about insurers, it is about transparency across each of these that becomes important to the scale. And then again, your data and analytics and algorithm is something that needs to work at scale. So something that was accurate for, let's say, 1,000 data points, it needs to be accurate for millions of data points, right? So you need to test that solution for, do I, as a result, let's say, need data every second? Do I need data every 2 seconds? What does that do to my cost, etc., etc.? Go ahead. So some examples of players who've used incubation and scale-up concepts. So Ecom Express, it was founded in 2012. It is fairly known. It was incubated with Warburg Pincus. Pincus is a global private equity firm. So they gave them office space, they gave them some initial funding. And during that stage, they fine-tuned their service offerings. They did some partnerships with one or two e-commerce players, and then they launched their service, right? I think it was like a bare minimum with about 30 or 40 customers that they did this program with Warburg Pincus. And let's please go ahead. The other one is Porter. A lot of you have heard about this. Now, this was incubated in ISB, and ISB has a good one actually. It's called D Labs. I myself have, kind of been part of the panels where we have looked at some of these opportunities. So there you get a lot of access in terms of experts, a lot of mentoring opportunities that you get, a lot of market insights that you get. And I'm assuming Porter, right? So Porter essentially is trying to again solve for that last mile problem through aggregation. And so here their challenge really was that Porter was doing it in, let's say, one city at the incubation stage where they proved it. Their challenge at the scale up stage was, how do I do it for the length and breadth of the country, right? And how do I not do it only on my own, but I enlist more and more ecosystem partners to do it? Go ahead. So if I were to just sum up everything that I said, what are the success factors? The opposite of this are also the failure factors, right? What are the things that lead to failure? The first is your agility and adaptability, right? So you start out with something, you need to have focus on the problem statement, but you really need to be agile about the means for solving it. You cannot assume that this is the only way in which I will solve for the problem, right? So you can hammer at the nail in a lot of different ways, and that's something that is extremely important for any startup player. The second is innovation and tech adoption. It's something that I can't say enough of. There is no problem statement in today's time and age which can be solved for without technology playing a key role. So whether you are a techie or not a techie, this is something that becomes extremely crucial for you to use. The third is, and not necessarily in this order, maybe I would put up customer focused mindset first, right? So I strongly believe, and it's an Amazon principle also, that if you can solve for one customer, any problem for one customer, single individual, right? Mr. Hari Krishnan, for example, if you can solve that problem for one single customer, trust me, it's something that you would be able to scale at least to some extent. If you really focus on making this customer delighted, right? That's how it starts. And that is what is called value proposition led and customer led problem solving. Then, of course, there are other aspects around leadership, around culture. And the last one, not enough can be said. This is the world of partnerships. It is not the world of competition. So you need to be able to strategically partner with a lot of players to be able to deliver value. If you try and do it yourself, you're set up for failure, because this is not how business gets done in this day and age. So on that note, I will end the presentation formally, and I will switch to some of the questions that are there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
So sorry, I did not understand this question. Hub and spoke model to reduce dead-headed and dwell time. Sorry, what does that mean?
Ashok, if you're there, if you can either put in the chat box, or if you want to speak, either way, it's okay. Ashok, if you're there.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next one. And Ashok, if you come back, then please do tell me, or Dr. Chaudhary, you let me know if there's more being typed. Do we see Roro services, truck on train kind of transportation? So yeah, I mean, why not, right? So what you're saying is, can we put trucks on a train? And hence do the last mile. So this is something that definitely gets done on ships across. On trains, the issue is that so if you need more flexibility in a system, the moment you get stuck with the asset, that let's say your train gets delayed, let's say there is pilferage that happens along the way, not only are you losing because you are on a train that is running late, that is not delivering the SLAs that it is needed, your other asset is also stuck, right? So the idea does need exploring, but yeah, there could be applications around it, definitely, Manish. Do we have any solution for minimizing freight rate variation across the year? So this is what the national logistics policy is trying to do. So not the variation, but at least so see, the freight rates are a result of lot of things. For example, crude oil prices, etc. Right, which you cannot really regulate. If a per barrel cost goes up to $100, you can't really do much, because that will have an impact on what a truck uses. The other thing is just the cost of the asset itself, right? So if you have your OEMs that are selling the trucks at a certain rate, it becomes very difficult. And there is, let's say, a regulation that says that I need only this type of asset. Then there is a certain fixed cost that is going in that asset. And as a result, it changes depending upon what the operator is running it on. So it's a little difficult to minimize the variations, but it is definitely possible to manage it, to make it more predictable. So there are algorithms that are able to tell you what's going to happen, and there are use cases. For example, one of the use cases that Taabi is working on is, if I can point the driver to a petrol pump that has the cheapest rate, right? So let's say it is flying between Delhi and Hyderabad. I will tell the driver to fuel it at appropriate places where the fuel price is less, right? Because that's something my algorithm can read basis the public data that is available. So instead of fleet operator fueling it near Delhi, I will tell the fuel operator only fill as much as is needed for you to reach to this nearest fuel pump where the fuel price is going to be much lesser, right? So those kind of things are possible for you to be able to indirectly work at freight rates. I'll move on to the next question by Vishwanath. So, since supply chain is a broader operating model, it would be our priority to first identify the points of constraints, right? Because working on these individual functionalities would not create a high level resolution. So it depends, right? See, for me, these are like, making very simple things complex, right? So when we study, like especially as MBA students and all, we think a lot in Porter's 5 principles and etc. Right? But hota hai ki dhande mein ultimately what matters is the customer, right? So if you're able to just go to that customer point and understand, uh, is there a problem statement that this customer has, and in your estimation, are there enough number of customers that are likely to be having this problem? You start there, and then you understand what are the points in the network that need to be solved for. And you can be a niche player that may be only working on one part of the solution, for example freight aggregation, right? So freight tiger comes in and says ki mujhe bas ye freight aggregation ka kaam karna hai, I don't want to get into warehouses, and I don't want to get into other parts of the problem statement, I only want to work into it. There is a delivery that may come in and say I want to do everything, I want to even get into freight. Right. So yes, in a way you're right that you need to know what are the parts that get impacted. That's why that designing your solution is something that extremely important. But after that, what is really important is whether you're addressing that customer's problems. I hope I've answered your question, Vishnath. Um, Permanent, the question is how to provide a business solution best fit, and from where we can get skillfully solution resources to make competitive quote. Sorry, I didn't understand this question. Permanent, do you want to explain?
Permanent, if you're there, if you either you can put in the chat box or Q&A, or if you want to speak, either way, we are okay.
I
Okay,
think
so I'll
there.
yeah. Okay, there are people who've raised their hands. Do you want to just allow them to talk?
Yeah. Murli, can you just enable them to talk, please? Murli, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm allowing Siddharth Karde. Just give me.
Okay, so I'll move to the next one till Parmanand comes online.
I've unmuted Siddharth. Siddharth, you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, Siddharth, which was the question? We have Parmanand, whose question we were referring to actually.
I'm not sure if he's still around.
All right, so let's move ahead. Let's move ahead. Manjari, the question is, in my view, the industry has moved from just supply chain visibility to supply chain optimization, absolutely, and looking for connected supply chain solutions. Your views? Multiple, right? Multiple delivery itself, like I talked about, their problem statement right now is all data led. It is not about visibility at all in terms of where my truck is, where my good is, how it is stored. It is much beyond that. It is about, so the reason why they're investing in so many warehouses, etc., is so that they can optimize some of the costs that we're talking about. So everything is very, very multivariate. It is no more just about transparency. It is really about ensuring that right from the moment that, let's say, I sit and order something on an Amazon, what is the least possible rate and least possible time in which that good gets transported, reaches me, right? From whichever e-commerce player to me. And for solving that problem, absolutely, it is not something that is a single thread that you can solve for. There can be experts, there can be niches, but there are a lot of players like delivery that are solving for this problem. Tawir Ahmed, sea logistics, why not being used fully to connect a coastal area? Yes, absolutely. In fact, this is also something that the logistics policy talks about. I did not touch upon it because we are illustrating more around road and briefly around railways. So very minuscule amount of transportation actually gets done through sea. One, it is expensive, and again, the whole thing around last mile, etc., is an issue. So one of the big white spaces in this area is if there is any platform that provides land and sea visibility seamlessly. You'll be surprised to know that most of these players, they run on different systems on land and different systems on sea, right? So that end-to-end visibility of the cargo and all the processes, right? So add to this all these clearance agents, custom agents, right? So a lot of these people come in. There is no single platform on which this entire thing works. So while the logistics policy aims to solve for it, but it's going to take at least 10 to 15 years to do that. So in between, of course, there is that opportunity, and sea is something that really can be made much, much cheaper than road transportation. The PPT, yes, Dr. Chaudhary, I leave it to you to kind of, share it if that's something that's relevant. Ma'am, it can reduce empty truck traveling back. I'm not sure what the context was, Ashok.
I think he has given some explanation down below.
Of something which is deadhead is, whereas in present scenario, the trucks after delivering, yeah, absolutely. So the freight tiger, it's absolutely yes. Okay, now I understand the content. Absolutely yes. So players like Freight Tiger, etc., trying to solve for this problem, but I think the logistics policy is looking at doing this in a big way. So the freight corridors that it is building, the visibility of freight that it is providing, so it's the way the vision is that, let's say if you are somebody who wants to ship your goods, you log on to this app or on this platform, it will tell you which is the best mode of transporting it, which is the nearest warehouse where you can store your good, what is the cost that will be needed, and who is currently available to do this for you, and you are connected to that, right? That's the vision of the national logistics policy. So it's something that could definitely, I think, a lot of these factors could lead to, if you're able to optimize some of these things, they would have cost impact as well as they would have a lot of value around the quality of delivery. Um, by increasing transparency across all connected vehicles, we can reduce the dwell time, vehicle waiting time for, yes, absolutely. So this is again one of the problems that Taabi is trying to solve for, right? That if you know the visibility end to end, then you're able to have more control. So the control tower solution that we have does exactly that. Some of the problem statements that are still unsolved that we're working on is that a lot of the factories, for example, don't know what their production schedules are, right? And they make the trucks wait for 2 days, 3 days before loading them. So the fleet operator is helpless, right? So he's like, कि मेरा तो truck उधर ही पड़ा है. But if there is enough data available, then this fleet operator can negotiate with these companies and tell them that I am charging you more for freight because vis-a-vis, let's say, these 5 other companies that I deal with, your wait time is more, and this is the impact on my cost that it has. Right now, most fleet operators don't use this kind of data. Last mile positioning happens even in relatively unorganized environments. For example, when a Kumbh event happens, every necessity of such huge gatherings are taken off surprisingly. How do you think or describe such a supply chain mechanism forms itself? I'm not clear on the question, Mani, if you can elaborate, or Dr. Chaudhary, in case you're clear about the question, you can also talk about in case Mani is not unmuted.
Mani, if you want, if you want to speak, please let us know so that you can, throw some more light on that.
Okay, so I'll go ahead. Ashok, I think it's related to your previous point that yes, NLP does take care of both the issues. As I am in EPC projects facing a lot of logistic problems at ground. I hear you, Anil. Absolutely. Mohammed, a lot of map solution players have come up recently competing Google. What criteria can be taken into account while choosing them, while building a tech platform around them? So it depends upon your problem statement, right? So, for example, we're using Google, though it's slightly more expensive than Map My India, which is the other one. It's also more accurate, right? However, I'm building algorithms on the side to also optimize from some of the other map players. So it all depends on what you need. So maybe at an incubation stage, what you focus on is accuracy so that you're able to prove your problem statement. But as you scale, what you will need to solve for also is scale. So both accuracy and scale would become important. So how do you choose to deploy your tech stack to be able to ensure accuracy at a minimal cost would be something that would be extremely important. So the way I choose, I mean, in my statement, it was, hey, let's look at the best in this. So in the best case scenario, what is it that I'm able to solve for, right? So I hope that gives you a sense. What are your views about Industry 4.0? I mean, it's like uh, there are lots of aspects to it, and I think there are different players who are at different points of Industry 4.0. So just give you an example, in Seat, right, which is a company that I worked with, we've launched something called MES, right? So where the machines are able to talk to each other and take commands and able to kind of implement a lot of things. We've also launched something called the Lighthouse Project, which is about making our factories smart plants. In fact, today there was something on CNBC talking about the Lighthouse Project for Seat that you would like to look at. So there are different companies or different manufacturing setups, different industries that would be at different points of digitization, smartness, technology. What is extremely important to understand is that ultimately everything has to be linked to your problem statement. It would be very, very important to not do things for the heck of doing things. For example, one of the latest fad is GPT, right? So it's got great applications, but there are a lot of companies that are taking up projects just because, hey, everybody has a FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. कि ऐसा कुछ आया है अभी बाढ़ भी आ गया अभी जीपीटी भी आ गया so let's all go ahead and do it, right? But unless you have a solid use case, you'll just be money down the drain. So there needs to be a solid use case looking at the customer problem that is trying to solve for and whether it is relevant in your industry to be able to do it. So for example, just to tell you, a lot of the problem statements that people think are being solved by GPT are actually just being solved by machine learning algorithms. So it's structured data as opposed to unstructured data, right? So that's the kind of difference. So even Industry 4.0 is very important to not go the fad route, but go to actual applications of whatever technology that is being used. But the bottom line is digitization helps in a lot of ways, and sooner or later, most companies will have to go in that direction. Can we use biofuels to reduce the logistics cost, which amounts to about 60% of the total cost? Absolutely. Biofuels, EV, for example, hydrocarbons is one of the things. Now, the issue is, let's say in the trucking side, right? A lot of players have to come together and say yes. So Tata Motors, Ashok Leyland, they all have to come back and say, ki, now I will stop manufacturing my IC related technology, right? I'll get more EV, I will get to other technology, which is expensive. It's a consolidated industry with most of the market in just these two players. So how do you solve for it? But there are a lot of startups who are coming into this space and looking at alternate ways of doing this. So I'm very hopeful for the future that it will happen. We see a lot of headlines by Reliance also where they're getting into alternate fuels. Lot more companies would be coming in, and I think if the biggies start investing in it, the other biggies will become consumers of it. But it's a slow, steady, painful process, right? So we'll have to just wait and watch. EV, for example, right, total cost of ownership goes down drastically if you get into an electric vehicle ownership. But most consumers are only bothered about that upfront cost because EV vehicles also tend to be very expensive. So the problem statement that comes there is how do I, let's say, get into EV leasing? right? Where the cost of owning an EV vehicle, upfront cost of owning an EV vehicle is brought down. How do I create infrastructure? You would have heard of Sun Mobility as one of the startup players, right? Which are creating infrastructure in the space of battery swapping, etc., to be able to do this. So infrastructure is something that is extremely important. So it does bring down the cost, but there's a lot of associated things that need to happen for the problem to be solved. How is it going to be impacting the logistics industries in the future? About 4.0, I think we already
Yeah,
spoke
that's what we
about.
said.
Chat GPT, I already spoke about. So I hope I have answered most of the questions. In case I've forgotten, I think I tried to uh, put a lot of things into the sessions. It is possible that a few things have been missed, so my apologies for that. But it was lovely talking to you, and Dr. Chaudhary, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pala. I think we are almost 30 minutes past the scheduled time. And then I think what it has done is not only it has sensitized about this industry and the kind of opportunities that are there. I think most important and interestingly, I think some of the participants must have got some startup ideas, right? I think the kind of problem that we look at it, right? Even if let's say one or two ideas come up, and I'm sure we'd love to pass on them to you, and then see if there's any way that we can either incubate, and then probably we can scale it up, right? But absolutely, thanks to you. I think somebody like you, who have been brought up in this industry and breathing. I think every last minute challenge that you must be seeing it. But I think one of the things I just want to share with you, and not that you should answer. I think one of the things that we keep looking at. I think maybe 2 months ago I was in Jammu. I think the local economy there, thrives on a lot of this perishable goods, right? And then one is the tourism, where that's another part of it. That's one part of it, because the whole economy thrives on that. But the other thing is that they have a lot of things to supply to the rest of the world, definitely the rest of the India as well. For example, simple thing like apples, right? So therefore, the large question is that, is there any mechanism that somebody like you can think of to ensure that we have a very an ease of logistics as far as the perishable goods are concerned? And again, like you're saying, you'll have to have some different ecosystem around the infrastructure thing around it. Maybe the refrigerator system that you need to be having, because the shelf life is only so much, right? And then before they get to the shelves, they're most of the time they are in the travel stage, and that's when the entire thing is gone. Likewise, you look at a lot of other places in India which have produced these seasonal commodities which are very perishable, and therefore by the time the rest of the country gets them, either they are out of the season, and therefore they become more expensive, things like that. So I know from your experience, is it any somebody must be contemplating it, I'm sure, but from your
So there are a lot of, like, my quick 30-second answer on that, Dr. Chaudhary, is that a lot of these FMCG companies who are in the food space, without naming them, they already have the solution. Like there is, for example, ability to predict a crop. For example, it starts with that weather forecasting, etc. It starts with that. It starts with farmer participation, where you are only partnering with a set of farmers who are providing you a reliable yield and reliable quality. And then there is transportation, like I said, right? There are these temperature control sensors, etc., that will tell you what needs to be done. So a lot of these players are actually using it. But again, India has always been that lot of access to everything good is limited to very few people in the economy, right? It's not something that's passed to the unorganized setup. So I think the solution lies in that big corporates, the government and private partnership, something along those lines to come together. But there are solutions, and it's a mix of IoT, route planning, and ecosystem partnership, just to kind of give you a sense.
Thank you so much once again. But from all of us, from all of our participants, from all of us at Times Pro and rest of the team, thank you so much, Pali. It's amazing, to listen to you. And hopefully, like I said, maybe one or two ideas come up, which we can toss up with you, and for a point of view of startups, I'm sure there must be some good ideas that must be coming over the next few days and maybe a few weeks. From all of us, once again, thank you so much for spending. Especially on Saturday evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best to all of you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.